Hi, I'm Terry Dunne. I'm Laois Historian In Residence under the Decade of Centenaries programme. Join me in a journey into the hidden history of the Irish Revolution as it happened in Laois, and together we can rediscover our past. This is a map of part of the Coote estate. It's actually a map of Borris-Little, which, when the map was being made in 1895, was on the outskirts of Portlaoise, but is now more part of the town. The Coote estate was the largest in County Laois, with almost 50,000 acres, comprised more than a tenth of the county. So tenant purchase was still ongoing at the time of the Irish Revolution. When you get to the early 1920s, almost half of County Laois had yet to be purchased from the landlords under the Land Acts. In 1915, about half the farms in County Laois were sized between 5 acres and 30 acres, falling under or nearly under the government standard for an economic holding. In a nutshell, they were too small to be viable. So for this reason, there was a conflict around the distribution of farmland. As well as that, a lot of the people who worked on farms were not farmers. They were wage workers employed on someone else's farm. So there was another point of contention around those people's wages, working conditions and living conditions. All of this added up to a significant challenge to the British state and to the new Irish Free State. And for that reason, there was significant social reform, including the construction of labourers' cottages, land redistribution under the 1923 Land Act, as well as efforts to diversify and improve Irish agriculture so as to make small farms more economically viable. This is the Lamberton Demesne. 100 years ago, this was let out to graziers under the 11th-month system, and there was a protest against that. On May 13th, 1917, 100 people gathered behind the Timahoe Band to march on the Lamberton Demesne to drive cattle off the land. This was cattle driving, which simply meant driving cattle off disputed land. This was the main tactic of the ranch war in the first decade of the 1900s and came back into use in 1917 and 1918, and most especially in the spring of 1920 and also again in 1922. So what you had was, in the Lamberton case, in a lot of these cases, is you had lands let out under the 11th month system as conacre for seasonal grazing. You had large tracts of land. The point was to interfere in the working of the market so as that the same land would be let out or sold in smaller, more affordable portions. The 11th month system, it was especially favoured by landlords because if you were only leasing somewhere for 11 months, you didn't count as a tenant, so didn't have the full legislative rights. You have to imagine 100 people here, the Timahoe Band marching around, some people trying to remove cattle off the land, some people trying to bring cattle back onto the land. As the cattle drivers were driving off Brennan's cattle, MP arrived to return his cattle onto the lands. Eventually, the cattle were driven to the ash trees at Stradbally. There was a Royal Irish Constabulary baton charge. At that point, Councillor P. Dunne intervened to defuse the situation. He marshalled the crowd into military formation and they paraded the streets of Stradbally behind the Timahoe Band. They stopped when they got to the market square and they held a rally beneath the tricolour flag. This was one of the first times the tricolour flag was flown at a major public event in Laois. The context was, a few days earlier, Sinn Féin had triumphed in the South Longford by-election, and significantly, the cry of the crowd was "Up McGuinness." It was Joseph McGuinness who had won in the by-election. In the spring of 1920, the focal point of cattle driving shifted more to the southwest of the county, to the area around Borris-in-Ossory and running from Borris-in-Ossory down to Rathdowney. And so it's for that reason Donaghmore Workhouse, which is in the heart of that district, was taken over by the British military to be used as a temporary barracks. Join me in this journey through the hidden history of the revolution as it happened in Laois. Hit the subscribe button, follow us on social media, tell your friends and family. Join me on a journey of discovery through a divided land.